executive director, and I've been with Beacon for 15 years, and it's been honestly the privilege of my life to lead this just amazing organization. Been very grateful to be a part of that. And I always like to start talks with a little theme or just a kind of a quote that can inspire us, and I think this is a particularly potent one that actually came from our last inauguration. Amanda Gorman, who is the youngest inaugural poet to present at the inauguration. And she offers these words, which are part of a much larger poem, but they're just beautiful words, and I think they speak to our times. For there is always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it. I love that. If we're only brave enough to be it. When I talk about homelessness, I always like to talk about people first, because it's very important to remember that every stat and number and project and figure has a human being behind it. It has a face, it has a name, it has people behind it. And it's really important to get to know some of those people first and foremost before we do anything else. This is Coy, and Coy represents probably who we think of stereotypically as a person experiencing homelessness. Coy is chronically homeless, which means he had been homeless for more than a decade in his case. Disabilities were what were keeping him homeless. And chronic homelessness represents about 15 to 20% of people experiencing homelessness out there. Chronic homelessness is particularly challenging and particularly difficult. Because people who are experiencing that tend to have a lot of high needs. And the average age of death for a chronically homeless person is 47 years old. So Coy had been homeless for more than a decade. He dealt with a number of challenges, one of which was alcoholism, which you can kind of see by the beer over his right shoulder. He lived outside. Some of you may even have known him. He lived outside on the streets of downtown for quite some time. And he was somebody that we worked with quite a bit to try and help get housed, but he kind of resisted that care. He resisted, he was a very sweet, very nice guy, but just kind of reticent and would kind of distance himself from care and support. But after about 2 years, through a whole bunch of work in the community, he accepted our invitation to help him move into a home. And we helped him move into a home. And Coy, just to get a sense of him, Coy was dealing with alcoholism, but he also was dealing with what we call trimorbidity. So he had 3 core issues. He had a alcohol substance use issue. He had a mental health issue with severe clinical depression, and he also had a physical condition. He was living with Crohn's disease. And he lived on the street with that. He actually had a colostomy and a colostomy bag and a stoma, but he didn't have medical supplies. So he would actually excuse this, but he would actually use Kroger bags in exchange for medical supplies as a colostomy bag for him. He lived on the streets like that. Sometimes it became so cold that bag actually froze to his body. And he developed a permanent wound around the stoma where he was living, and that actually led to a nickname for him that he took with some humor, but was also quite serious, which is he was called Stinky, was his nickname, because the wound was so severe and challenging. We did get Coy into homes, and we worked very closely with a number of supportive providers, including Volunteers in Medicine at the time. To do a lot of work with him, help him get the medical supplies he needed, help him get into a wound care doctor. And he eventually did get into care and started to get better. And as he improved, he said one of the most amazing things I've heard from a client. He said to the caseworker who was with him in the doctor's appointment, as he's in a home, he's getting care, as he's getting better, he's improving, his wound is healing. He said, I didn't think I could get better. And I love that phrase because, one, it expressed a reality for him, which is that he didn't think he could get better. But it also expressed something magnificent, which is now he was in awe that he was getting better. And I think that's one of the core things that we do for people, is we offer this opportunity to see possibility again in their lives, even when it's been so fully pulled out of them after the challenges of life. So COI represents about 15 to 20% of people experiencing homelessness. This is another face of homelessness, and probably one we don't think of as stereotypically associated with homelessness, but families represent about 35 to 40% of people experiencing homelessness in our community. This is Natalie, and Natalie was homeless as a young one, and the highest percentage chance of you becoming homeless in your lives, of any of us becoming homeless in our lives, is in our first year of life. And so Natalie represented that percentage in her work. And we again work with that family and work with Natalie and care for them and supported them while they were homeless, and then supported them as they eventually moved into a home. And then here's another example. This is Rob, and Rob was working at the Denny's. Some of you probably remember the Denny's. Some of you may have remembered the story in the paper where Denny's closed very suddenly, and workers showed up to Denny's and didn't realize that the business was closed and they didn't have a job anymore. Well, Rob was one of those people from that story that showed up to his work on that day and suddenly realized he was out of a job. He was a manager at Denny's, and he lost his position there. Rob was living in his home with his dependent, with his son. He had raised a number of children as a single father, and most of them had become adults at this point. But he also had a dependent son that was living in his home who was dealing with schizophrenia, and he continued to care for him. Soon after he was fired, the place where he lived increased the rent rather significantly, so much so that he couldn't continue to live there. So he let his rent expire, and he moved into his van with his son and lived out of his van for several months. He eventually found us, got word of us, and found support with us, and we were able to help him with a rapid rehousing program and help move him into housing, and he's been doing well ever since. So when we talk about homelessness, I want, as we're getting into numbers, I want to kind of make sure that we keep those three faces in our minds. They're three faces of many, but they're also three faces that represent a lot of what we deal with. So as we look at these numbers, we're talking about COI, and we're talking about Rob, and we're talking about Natalie. These are the people who are represented in these numbers. And you'll see something interesting. This is the number of people experiencing homelessness from our point in time count, which is a one-time count once a year that we do every year. This is going back to 2015 to our latest count in 2024. And you'll see something very interesting, which is, except for an anomaly year in 2019, homeless numbers have stayed relatively the same. They're bouncing a little bit here or there. But the numbers are more or less the same between 2015 and 2024. If we actually looked at that as a projection, which it may be a little increase, it's about 6% of an increase. Nationally, homelessness has increased 17%. So we hear this narrative in our community that homelessness is exploding and going wild and crazy in our community. And in fact, what the actual numbers show is it's remaining fairly steady, and has for at least the last decade in our community. And I attribute that certainly not to us having a good housing market. That in large part, I think this is due to some incredible advocacy work and supportive services and housing support in our community that's fought against the increasing challenges of housing in our community to at least hold the line. I think every one of us would want to see these numbers going down, but at least in the face of the national climate that we're dealing, and the local climate with housing, we've more or less held the line, except for that one unique year in 2019, which none of us are really sure what that was, but it came back to normal numbers the next year. So if homelessness isn't growing, why do people feel like it's growing in our community? Why is that a sentiment that people think is going on? And this is a similar, from the same count, a point in time count. This is a reflection of people who are homeless who say that they have a severe mental illness. And what you can see, we see something really interesting happening in 2018 to 2019. Something changed quite dramatically and quite significantly. We see suddenly the the number of people who are being surveyed say that they have a severe mental illness at a number that's significantly higher than the previous year, almost double in that case. And if we look from 2018 to 2024, it's almost triple. So one of the things we're seeing very clearly is that within people, the population of homelessness, within people who are experiencing homelessness, which is a very fluid changing dynamic, but within that, we're seeing that the people who are homeless are having much greater challenges, in particular with severe mental illness. So that's one reason why we're seeing more homelessness and experiencing that. And another reason is this. So this is people with substance use disorder, and we see a very similar change, not quite as significant, but similar from 2018 to 2019, where we see a jump. I think that's about 60% or so there, and then it continues to more than double over the course of that same period of time. So that's kind of the challenges that we are facing as a community. Not only are we facing a great challenge of housing affordability, but we're also facing the challenge of the people who are experiencing homelessness in our community are dealing with much more significant problems, mental illness and substance use too. And I bet if we had data on physical health conditions, I bet you we'd see a real uptick in those numbers as well. So that brings us to Beacon and what Beacon does. You may know Beacon for the work that we've done. We're a quarter century old, just coming up on our 25th anniversary this January. And we have a number of programs. We're most well known for Shalom Center, but there's also our kitchen and our overnight shelter, which is Friends Place. And we have street outreach work and two core housing programs, Rapid Rehousing and Crawford Homes. One, Rapid Rehousing worked with Rob, and Crawford Homes worked with Coy. And those are the core programs, but this is kind of, and we can talk about this as overnight shelter and things like that, but a lot of this you could just find online and it'd be easy, the details of the programs, what we do. I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the why, or the core nature of Beacon. And I think one of the most important things about Beacon is we are a solutions-driven organization, that our goal is to solve problems, and that when the community presents problems, that we step in to try and address and solve those problems. And that's a deep part of our nature. I think it's a deep part of our DNA. So that's why our tagline is Solutions for People in Poverty. It's like our goal is to solve problems. And this is just kind of a list of some of the things, but we were founded on this very premise when there were people experiencing homelessness who had no place to stay during the day. That's how we stepped in and said, let's provide a room. 25 years ago, that's how we began. Let's provide a room. Let's provide a little simple place for people to be. When housing became more of a challenge, there was a lot of talk about let's create a new year-round shelter, and we said no. Let's work on the solutions. Let's focus on housing, and we developed two housing programs to house homeless families and people with disabilities. What we just talked about in Rapid Rehousing and Crawford Homes. As Martha's House faced bankruptcy, we stepped in to take over the management of that shelter and kept that going now as Friends Place. When the pandemic hit, we opened and managed the Monroe County Isolation Shelter, so people who were exposed to COVID could flee. And one of the things I'm incredibly proud of is that we did not have a single person experiencing homelessness die of COVID during the pandemic. I think that's extraordinary and due to an enormous amount of efforts, and not just Beacon, a lot of partners working together to make that happen. Some of you remember there was a large homeless camp that formed in Seminary Park, and we, within 11 days of deciding to do it, we opened an emergency winter shelter, which was a lot of work. And And even this, when a local homeless shelter for women closed, we nearly tripled our shelter occupancy for women to respond to that closing of that women's shelter, and Beacon's now the largest emergency shelter for women in our community. So this is just kind of a testament to all the things over the years when communities have presented problems, we step in to try and solve those problems and address those problems, making what I think solutions is a big part. It's just the very nature of who we try to be as an organization. We're there to solve problems. And so that brings us to this time with those numbers that we looked at, with housing affordability getting more and more challenging, with mental illness being incredibly difficult and severe substance use being more. It's calling us as an agency to take ourselves to an even stronger level, an even more needed level, a bigger level, to really address the problems that are being presented to us in such a serious way. And that has led to, well, I forgot to mention that, but we have become the largest nonprofit housing provider for people experiencing homelessness in our community. That's another example of the solutions-driven side, with housing 549 children and adults last year alone. Sorry, I could have, skipping along here. But as we deal with these challenges and these problems, we developed something that we're calling the Light the Way campaign, where we're seeking to step into Amanda Gorman's words and the words of so many others and the words of our organization's name to light the way for people who need us to step more fully into that. And this campaign that we're working on began with a visit over a decade ago to the Twin Cities when I went to a housing conference. And as part of that housing conference, they took us to other facilities around the community to see what they were doing, what housing organizations were doing, what shelter organizations were doing. And there was one that really stuck with me. We walked in, and on this first floor was this kind of, it was this very easy, gentle space to be in. They had a medical clinic there, they had a legal clinic there, and it was a low barrier facility. You could walk in. They had winter sheltering where you could, if you needed just an easy place to crash in the middle of the winter when you were at threat, they could do that. Some meals, some basic services, just very, supportive, caring, easy access, front door kind of services. And then on the next floor, they had an overnight shelter that asked more of people. So when you were doing a bit better, you could move into this overnight shelter, and you could succeed and do a little more as you were working and getting your life in more care. You could take that next step up. And then above that, it was a 6th floor facility. The next floors, they had housing on all those. And what I loved about that facility is that built into it was this structure of progress that you could see from that first very vulnerable encounter in experience of homelessness, to doing a bit better, to getting to the goal, which is to be housed in your own home successfully, achieving the life goals that you want to achieve. And so that vision over many years has just been sitting there and stewing and serving and kind of working its way through my consciousness. And that has led us to a place where we have created our own vision, which we call the Beacon Center. And there's an image of the Beacon Center right there. It's still a dream, but it's come quite a long way since so we actually have architectural plans and a design. This is a facility that we're hoping to locate on, well, we have the property, so assuming everything goes right, it'll be located at 1201 West 3rd Street, which is the old Weddle Brothers property, and near Crescent Donuts. Everybody's like, oh, I know where Crescent Donuts is. So it's like, I know you are now. And so this is the beautiful opportunity for this facility. And here's another view. This is a kind of a top-down view to give you a sense of this. It's 2 floors. It's a 45,000 square foot facility that's bringing together all of the services of Beacon into one space, but even more importantly, allowing us to do even more with what we're capable of doing. So it's not just a goal to provide more food and shelter. The goal is really to provide a level of quality in the work that we're wanting to improve upon. So there's the back view. And then this is the front floor, first floor of the building. And you can see there's the day center. And that's that front access, that easy entry access. And one of the things that I'm really excited about and proud about in that facility is that we are doing something our community's dreamed of for a long time, which is bringing together multiple agencies and organizations together to work in the same place. We've talked about this for years. Why can't we all bring all these agencies together to work in the same place? And that's one of the best things that we're doing in this space. And so we have offices there for Beacon's support, but we have a clinic that we're building for HealthNet specifically so that they can use the services there. We have offices for caseworkers and a therapist from Centerstone. We also have an office for the downtown resource officers and social workers in the Bloomington Police Department. And we have some other spaces that we're working on as well, maybe getting a relationship with parole to have them be able to do some of their work out of the facility also. With that, all that goal is just trying to bring people together so that we can, solve problems collectively together. In addition, we'll have in this space an employment center. So that's going to allow Beacon to move more forward into something that we've wanted to really grow into for quite some time, which is supporting people in employment. The kitchen will be a training kitchen, so we can train people there and do some work. And there's a lot of other things there. There's a multi-faith chapel. There's a classroom. There's a day sleep room. There's just a lot of important things there of value. The yellow, this is our overnight shelter. So that's that, opportunity to kind of go to a next step. And that's a 50-bed facility. And we're doing something very important there. We're moving out of the bunk bed dormitory packed spaces into semi-private rooms. So each person gets their own semi-private room, has their own single bed, and has that space. It's going to be a dog and animal friendly shelter, which is very important for people who are homeless. It's going to be have couples beds, and it's also going to be LGBTQ friendly, which is really important in our community for making sure that transgender people in particular feel safe and welcomed as they are disproportionately become homeless due to their gender identity. Each one of the people who works there will work with a caseworker to help them work on their progress and moving into success and moving into a home. So it's not just about improving, it's not just a place to sleep, it's a place to actually actualize, your next steps. And then last but not least, I want to say one of the things I'm most excited about, this is that top tier, which is housing. So the second floor of this facility will have 25 apartments built into it. 20 of those apartments are permanent supportive housing. So that'll be like what we provided for Coy and helped Coy with. And then 5, and that's the green, and then 5 in that purple color, those are what our work exchange apartments. So people will be able to work on site in exchange for their housing. So maintenance, security, working in the neighborhood, connecting with our neighbors, things like that to create a positive relationship with our community. And that down there that's admin, which is important for me, but also less interesting maybe. But that's where our admin is in that turquoise space. Now, there are some big people that are really supporting us, and which we're very excited. Our beloved Charlotte is an honorary co-chair on our team, and I'm going to zip through these because we're running out of time. But I just wanted to show a couple people who are big supporters so far. Here's the police chief, Mike Dekoff, excited about this, and our beloved new mayor is also quite happily supporting this. And I wanted to acknowledge that these are many, I think most, if not all, of the names of people who have already been actively involved as a volunteer in the campaign. So you'll see quite a number of people there, which I think is really great, and people that you may know that are involved in some way in the campaign. So that's really fantastic. And I'll just end with this quickly, but all in all, this is going to be an expensive project. It's going to cost approximately $20 million in total. About 15 million of that we're trying to raise from grants and tax credits. We've raised 8.3 so far, and I think somewhere around January we'll probably hear about another 7 million or so about that hopefully gets us to 15. And then we're doing a community appeal in this community to raise 5 million, that remaining 5 of that, and we're about 3.2 million into that. So really doing well there and successful there. So I'm going to finish up there and go to questions, but I just wanted to put this final slide that if you're interested in learning more, that's our website. And I wanted to have Amy Kendall, who is our development director, just raise her hand. So if you want to, yeah, you should thank her, yeah. But if you'd like to learn more, please feel free to talk with Amy or myself. We'll both stay after. And there's a number of other people that are. The Devanes are our honorary co-chairs. Jeff is a big supporter, and Andrew Apple. And sorry, I got to stop because I'll just miss people that I shouldn't miss. So a lot of amazing people. Tracy and Vaughn, who are here, are our campaign co-chairs. So yeah, okay. So I'm happy to take a question.
I really applaud your efforts trying to help these people. I just have 2 questions. How many people can you help at one time in this new facility? And are you concerned about other counties, surrounding counties? Once your facility is up and running, that they'll be sending us more of their problems than what they already do now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big emphasis on this facility was to focus on quality over quantity. So we did expand our services in some way. The biggest thing we tried to do was expand, the nature of what we were offering so that the services were better as opposed to bigger. And so that was intentional. So for example, our overnight shelter is just growing from 40 to 50 beds. So not a huge increase there. The dining room certainly will be quite a bit larger. But the biggest thing is we're focusing, the core thing, almost 50% of the square footage, I think it's 46% of the square footage is dedicated to the solutions side of it, which is housing. So that's really our emphasis has always been, I think, and continues to be, how do we solve a problem, not just provide food or shelter, but how do we get to the core of that? The idea of people coming in from outside is absolutely real. It's true. It's very common within urban areas that this happens. It's happening to every urban area in the country, more or less. And it's a challenge that is very significant. I encourage you, if you haven't read the Heading Home plan that just came out, called the Housing Action Plan, and it's a plan to address unsheltered homelessness. And in that, we have some ideas about how to make sure that we focus regionally and not extra regionally, if you will. And there's some data that we've seen recently that has shown that most of the people who are coming from outside of Bloomington are not coming from the neighboring counties. There's a small percentage that are, but the ones that are extra regional. So they're coming from beyond the region right around us. So we're working together with other counties to have a regional focus. For example, our overnight shelter right now prioritizes Monroe County residents right now in order to make sure that a Monroe County resident always has a bed if they need one. So that's some of the ways we've approached it. But that plan is a really good plan to check out to get some of the details about what we're thinking about how to deal with residency as a concern, and that idea that other folks need to be part of the solution to Monroe County can't solve every homeless challenge that comes across us. So yeah, thank you.